All right, Matt Cassel's here, NBC Sports, longtime NFL quarterback, first-time guest. What's going on, brother?
Oh, not a whole bunch, man. It's been an exciting weekend of football. I'm fired up, but at the same time, it's that time of year where you're sitting there and you're getting close to the end, and you're like, no, I don't want it to end. I don't want it. So, it's one of those things you got to enjoy it while it lasts because every football season finally does abruptly come to an end, and then you're on to the next thing.
I always say, whenever we're complaining about some, Bears Commanders Thursday night game, I'm like, guys,
Yeah,
on March 30th, you're going to be begging for Bears Commanders, just begging, saying one more quarter
just one
of
more, please.
Sam Howell throwing the ball directly into the dirt. That's all. It's all you're going to want to see. Before we get to this, when I was doing research for this pod, I had never seen the Matt Cassel, Danny McBride K-Swiss commercial. You kind of nailed it. But both you and Danny McBride nailed the delivery of your lines. I had never seen that. Danny McBride is a comedy god. I mean, you kind of crushed him, Matt.
It's pretty funny because we went down there for that the shoot itself, and Danny McBride is one of the funniest human beings I've ever been around. We're
Yes.
sitting around that little boardroom, and we're going through these things. Well, they didn't give me like a script beforehand, and it was a lot of improv because that's what Danny McBride's used to. So we're sitting there,
Right.
and they're like, "Look, just flip up the deal." And then go through the line and then talk to the audience like you would if you're actually pitching some of these ideas. So we started going through it. And the funniest part is at the end when I throw that shoe and I hit the guy that's not paying attention, right? I did the first take and I throw the shoe and I was like, they don't really want me to crush this guy, this actor that's sitting in there on his shoe. He's probably less than 10 feet away. So I throw it and they go, cut. And they go, Castle, we want you to F this guy up. That's why we're paying you. So for the next like 6 or 7 takes, I'm firing a shoe at this guy's hands and busting them all up. And the other part is when Danny McBride throws that muffin from directly
Yeah.
across the table at him. I mean, we must have had 5 cuts of him throwing different sized muffins at him. I mean, he crushed his face. He had it underneath his eyelid. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I was like, what just happened? I felt so bad for this poor guy. I hope he got paid a decent amount, but because he got crushed during that segment.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it's now on YouTube lore. Before we get to the NFL, you're a proud USC Trojan, obviously. If you're the Bears GM, is Caleb Williams your guy? And what can whoever takes Caleb Williams expect year one?
Yeah, you know what? I'm always impressed with Caleb Williams, what he's done. And really, he hasn't even played that much football. This is
Right.
really about 2.5 years of starting and what he's accomplished, what he can do on the field. His skill set is so vast and unique, and he's generational in terms of improvisation. Gosh,
Improvisation.
got to get that out. Got to get that out. That's a tough word. And what he can do. Now, the big thing for me is when you're looking at him and you're trying to identify, okay, where can he get better? I think some of it is just staying within the system because he's so confident in his abilities to get outside the pocket and make plays down the field that sometimes he'll bypass a wide open guy. I wish I had that skill set where I could be like, I'm going to bypass the 5-yard out that I know is open because I'm going to run around and throw a 40-yard bomb and make it happen that way and get on ESPN. But I think that's what evaluators have to take into consideration with Caleb Williams is he's not a finished product yet, but from a competitiveness standpoint, from a winning standpoint, from a guy that can go out there, make every throw, and he's got arm talent and he's got that special skill set, he's got all the ability to go out there and be the number 1 pick.
So the 4 games coming up here, it's really fascinating. And I think with the exception of the Lions, I think all 3 defenses are incredible. They get after the quarterback, and the Lions obviously have Aiden Hutchinson, but it's not the depth of the other
Right.
the other 3 teams. Is there a defense that stands out to you where you're saying, man, it would be a nightmare to be a quarterback against one of these 3 defenses, or
Well,
4
like
if you want to throw in the Lions?
yeah, great question. Because you look at all those 3 defenses that you just mentioned, and they're all elite defenses, and they've been good and solid throughout the course of the year. But when you look at Baltimore, to me, that's one of the most challenging defenses to go up against because schematically they have so much variation in the back end. They disguise really well. They bring pressures. They show you pressure one way, they bring it the other way. On the back end, they're always moving guys around, and they're so successful in doing it because they've got veteran guys that have played in the system. They know what to do. They know how to disguise and bait you. And so for a quarterback, it's never one of those situations where you come to the line of scrimmage and you're looking around going, oh, I've got this guy's playing off right now. I know they're in cover 4. I'm going to take the quick hitch. It's always that reactionary thing that you have to have where it's that guessing game of you've got to be able to sit there and say, oh, wait, okay, it's now post safety and get over to the other side of your read and not panic and stay within rhythm. And so that's always the challenging part for a quarterback and an offense to go up against a defense like Baltimore, who's one of the number one pass defenses, but they also can get after you and pressure you, make you uncomfortable in the pocket.
Staying on Baltimore here for a second, the thing that I don't understand about Lamar Jackson that you do because you're a quarterback is what? Like, what makes him special that I've never even thought about as far as just the way he's able to operate in the pocket, the way he's able to get downfield, all of this stuff as a quarterback. And obviously, listen, he is so unique in that you're going to see things he does, and you're going to say, okay, I couldn't do that. But just from a passing standpoint, a pocket presence standpoint, what makes him great?
You know what's he's evolved, right? And every year
Yeah.
he's gotten better and more comfortable, and now they've surrounded him with more weapons. So I think that brings confidence as well, because when you have guys on the outside that you feel that can go win, then you can throw that ball with anticipation and let it rip and not have to be questioned. Is he going to come out of his break at the right depth? Is he going to beat this guy man to man coverage? So that gives you a lot of confidence, but also he's got a poise to him in the pocket. He's able to move and create. Obviously, we know he can take off with his legs, but he has subtle movement patterns inside the pocket that he's gotten so much better at. And even last week, when you watched him play, there was one time where Houston wasn't able to get pressure on him, and he just sat back there. He was calm, he was
Yeah.
poised, he went through his read, and he was able to get the ball down the field. So the big part for him is he's been remaining a passer, and he waits until he has to take off and run, protecting himself really well. Other than that, though, he remains a passer, lets those guys get open, lets them do their thing and get open downfield, and that's really where the successes come for him, more so this year than any other year.
The Lions, obviously, you played for the Lions under Matt Patricia. And this is not a Patricia specific point because the Lions have been very bad for a long time.
Right.
Maybe some of that was above the coach and just sort of how they went about things in the organization. But the culture change that Dan Campbell has done in just 3 years is remarkable. It's one of the best turnarounds from a franchise standpoint I've ever seen. When you think about where Detroit was for not only when you were there, but the post Barry Sanders years before that, to where they are now. What stands out?
Dan Campbell, man, it's been
Yeah,
extraordinary. The leadership, Dan Campbell, and what that organization has done. The message that he had coming in from his first press conference on, and really setting the tone and giving these guys something to grasp onto. You know, he talks about grit. He talks about we'll play anybody, anywhere. But it's a mindset that you've got to have when you go in and you're trying to change not just the culture. And I know a lot of people use that word, but it is. It's culture, it's environment, it's making guys believe in what you're doing. It's pushing them to places that they didn't know that they could go. It's going out and getting a guy like Jared Goff, who obviously the Rams didn't want anymore, and everybody was saying, hey, he's going to be a bridge guy, and letting him build confidence in the system. And then it's also, look, they've been able to draft really well because they've been drafting very high in the draft for many, many years. But that offensive line, it starts with them up front. They're one of the best. They're big. They're physical. They've played
yeah.
together for a long period of time. You bring in a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been outstanding for them all year long. He can do it in the run game, pass game. So they've complemented Jared Goff with a great offensive line, running back, the pieces on the outside, and then the defense has gotten better each and every year. But at the same time, I'd say this is more of an offensive centric system in terms of they're going to have to score points, and this defense is going to have to make plays and be opportunistic like they were last week against Tampa Bay when they got the two turnovers.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious, and this might be a slightly offensive question, so I'll ask it carefully. So you come in 08,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody knows what that system looks like. You come in for the literal greatest quarterback of all time. Randy Moss is there. Wes Welker's there. The line is there. You would just come. They're the highest scoring defense of all time, and not just that, they had the innovation in '07. You know, the first team ever to run a majority of their plays in shotgun. A lot of the spread concepts. It was a miracle. It was a football miracle. What happened in 2007, even with the pieces that are already there. So you come in 08, and it almost felt like, okay, it's a well-oiled machine. You're at the helm. It feels a little bit with Brock Purdy now, where it's like, okay, you know what? You're just in there to run the Shanahan system. You have Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, you have George Kittle. When you're in there in '08, are you sitting there and caring about how much credit you're getting, or listening to the noise, or listening to the caller on talk radio saying, "Oh, Cassel, he's just a product of this"? Is it frustrating, or are you able to kind of block it out and say, "This is an incredible opportunity. I'm gonna not care what the noise looks like"?
It's an incredible opportunity, but you definitely hear the noise. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way that you can get away from it, especially in the media age that we're at now. There's even more people that are able to get access to you through Twitter, through social media, and whatever it might be. So you hear it, but part of being a quarterback is being mentally tough and having mental fortitude and being able to block that noise out, concentrate on the job, get into a routine week in and week out. And look, you're dealt the cards that you're dealt. And as a quarterback, you sit there and say, look, we've got a great team. I've got to go out there, and whether it's manage the game, whether it's make the big throw at the end of the game in the 2 minute drill to help the team win, whether it's this week, hey, look, this defense struggles against the run. We're going to run the ball predominantly. And then when we have those opportunities and they want to load the box, we're going to take our shots. That's part of being a quarterback. I always hate when people go, well, he's a game manager. That's the number
Yeah.
one thing you have to be as a quarterback. The number one thing. Now you've got to make plays when it's called upon. You got to hit the open target. But the way in which Brock Purdy has played throughout the course of this season has been outstanding. I mean, his
Yeah.
anticipation, his ball positioning to his catch and run guys to where it's a catch and run offense, right? They want to get the ball into those skill players' hands and make them go make plays, and he does it at a really high level. He knows the system. He gets them into the right plays with the check with me game, and so he's just different from what we see now in today's game with
Yep.
the quarterbacks now are the 4.0 version of what we used to be, where it was pocket pass, use your mind, use your mental capacity, know where to go with the football. Now you see all these guys with these extraordinary skill sets, but at the same time, Brock Purdy can do it in a different way, but it's still
Yeah.
going to be successful because that's how they built that team, and that's no fault of his own.
I completely agree with you. The game manager thing, the system guy thing. Well, guess what? Brock Purdy's really good at running the system. And there's a bunch of guys who've proven to not be really good at running that system. So I'm sure it drives you nuts when you hear, like, oh, so and so's a system guy. Yeah, that's the point of football, right?
That's exactly the point of football. I mean, and not to beat a dead horse right now, but you look at the
Yeah.
Eagles. They're stacked
Yeah.
with the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
They've got a great offensive line. They've got first round picks all over the defensive side of the ball. They weren't able to be as successful this year because they kind of stalled out at the end and didn't have that momentum going into playoffs, and eventually they lost. And so when you look at a team like San Francisco and the sustained success that Brock Purdy's had, it speaks to the man himself. And you can talk to George Kittle, you can talk to Debo
Yeah.
Samuel, and they will resoundingly say, hey, he's a dude. Like he's a
Yeah.
guy that's why we work. And we saw last year when he went out of the game against the Eagles in the NFC Championship last year and what that did to that offense and how they just became inept. And so, again, it goes back to what Brock Purdy offers his team and understanding the offense and what Kyle Shanahan's trying to get done, and that's how they call the game.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. I can't believe we've gone this long without mentioning Mahomes, the best quarterback of his era. When you watch him and you say, God, I wish I could do blank. I wish I could just steal something from Patrick Mahomes and put it into my career. What would it have been?
Gosh, I think I'm always in awe when I watch Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, of
Whether
course.
whether he's throwing in rhythm, but I think the main thing that I always am so impressed with is when he's able to move within the pocket, keep his eyes downfield around
Yeah,
everything, and his accuracy.
yeah,
He doesn't put the ball in harm's way. A lot of people when he first came in, they're like he's just a gunslinger. He's got a tremendous arm and all those things, but it's the way in which he manipulates the pocket and defenders, makes them come up and come off the guy that they're actually covering, and then still has the vision to see that or make a throwback. Like the stuff that he does, no quarterback coach or offensive coordinator sitting
yeah,
there saying, hey, yeah, definitely. Anytime you see that guy way back across the field, you just
yeah.
stop your feet and rip it, right? It's like the ultimate no-nos half the time. But the reason why they're so successful is because there's so much confidence that he does it, and he's shown it year in and year out that those plays are just part of who he is, and that's what makes him such an exceptional player.
A lot of it is borrowed from baseball,
Mm-hmm.
and his sort of the confidence, the calmness that comes along with baseball. And he said before, like his long toss, you know, he literally just does baseball warm-ups. He played baseball for a while.
Right.
I mean, it just seems like he just kind of knows where to go with the ball, and just kind of, you know, it's like he's turning two sometimes. It's crazy.
Yeah, the different arm angles he uses,
Yep.
and again, and it's also the feel that he has when to use the arm angles, understanding that this defender's jumping right here, he's got to get it around him, or he's making the throw down the field and he's running one way, but he sees and feels that guy going that way. And there's definitely, he said it before, and you know it as well. It's out there in the public that his baseball background, I think, has something to do with his abilities in the unique way in which he throws the football. And he does it, I mean, he does it from so many different angles where you're sitting there going, what? And then also, like when he's running to the sideline, he'll underhand it. And like, who
Yeah.
does that? Like the confidence that you have to do that. He's just an incredible athlete.
I thought it was funny the other day when the report came out that Bill Belichick wants to coach a talented, underachieving team. Well, frankly, that's most teams with a coaching opening. If they weren't
Right.
underachieving, they wouldn't have fired the previous coach. The only team that's not talented and underachieving is probably the Panthers, because they're not talented. But I've gone back and forth on this, because I feel like it would be so cool for Bill Belichick to have gone, and obviously these jobs are no longer open, to a Philadelphia or a Dallas, and just get an awesome roster and just maximize that talent. It would be so cool to see him game plan from one week to the next. A place like Los Angeles with Justin Herbert, let that
Right.
talent kind of thrive. When you're thinking about Bill and what his next chapter is going to look like, do you have a team in mind? Do you have a type of team in mind where you'd say, man, I know Bill, he would thrive with this?
Well, I think Bill, you put a collective talent around him, and he'll thrive. You see, the
Yeah.
game hasn't passed him by. You saw how that defense
Yeah.
performed this year. Obviously, the offense had their struggles throughout the year. They couldn't figure out the quarterback position. Mac Jones, they were hoping that he was going to rebound from last year and what took place with Bill O'Brien, but that never really came about this year. And so it must have been a frustrating year in that sense. But when you look at Bill Belichick, I mean, I know he still has a desire to coach. That was very
Yeah.
obvious when he had his closing press conference with the New England Patriots, that he was probably going to be on another sideline. Now, the big question is for him is, do you go to a place like Atlanta that has a lot of salary
Yeah.
cap space, but a lot of young talent on the offensive side of the ball? But again, you've
Hmm.
got a quarterback issue. You got to figure out the quarterback first and foremost. But I like what that roster has to provide. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to be able to go there and be able to rebuild that over 4 or 5 years, because he
Hmm.
is what, 70 years old, 71 years old. So how
Hmm.
much longer does he want to do it? I don't know, but I know that he's that close to that all-time winning record, and
Hmm.
he's a historian of the game and always has been one of those guys that would come in and talk to us about the history of the game and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Of
So
course.
he respects that aspect of it, and I think he can still do it at a really high level. It's just a matter of where that next spot's going to be for him.
Tom Curran says I have to ask you about wrestling Tom Brady.
Oh, I whooped him. I served him up. I served him up some humble pie. Yeah, well, that was in my younger years when my testosterone was through the roof and I could lift and run and do all those things. But in the off season, Tom and I were competitive in everything we did. We were lifting
Sure.
partners, whether it was pickup basketball, whether it was golf, whatever it might be. But he was like my big brother, right? And so I'd always be nagging him and stuff. He's like, okay, let's go. I'll kick your ass in wrestling. I was like, dude, come on, you don't want any of this. And he's like, let's go. So then I grab him, I body slam him, get on top of him. And right at that moment, it was so funny. I'm sitting there and I hear two voices, get off him, Cassel. What are you doing? And it's Rodney Harrison and Richard Seymour, and they're literally like jogging down the field at me, and I think they're gonna kick my ass. And I'm sitting, and they're like, "Dude, what are you thinking?" And like, and not in that nice of tone, right? And he's like, "You know what would happen, Castle, if he got hurt right now while you dumbasses are wrestling?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm probably not gonna be here tomorrow." And they're like, "Yeah, that's right. Don't touch him again." I was like, "Okay, good deal." I was like, "But a little bit of bragging rights, a little bit of bragging rights for old Cass Dog there."
That's amazing. So, Belichick's told the story about playing, I think, Pebble with Brady, and like the ball went on the rocks, and Brady was just like hanging off because he wanted to get the ball back in bounds. And everybody in the group was like, dude, you're going to die. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
fall off the cliffs. And Brady was like, yeah, whatever. What's the most unhinged competitive experience you've ever had with Tom Brady in anything, whether it's golf, pickup hoops, whatever?
Gosh, I mean, there's been multiple, but it is funny on the golf course. He does things on the golf course, and he like anybody that wants to bet, we're betting. And if he makes a putt, like he made a putt one time on 18, and it was probably like a 10-footer, and he went berserk. I thought he broke his club. He's throwing stuff. He's like, yeah, talking smack, like, and I'm like, dude, this is golf. Like, what are we doing right now? But that's who he was. Like, he was ultra competitive in everything we did. When it was on the football field, it was a whole different capacity, right? He took it to the next
Right.
level. He held people accountable. He wasn't afraid to call people out. He wasn't afraid to scream at the offensive line or Wes Welker or any of these guys. Like, that's just who he was. And you accepted that. And that's what made us great, was because it was not just the coaching staff holding you accountable, but it was the main dog. And he was going to bring it each and every day. And even at practice, when it was, in the off season, and we didn't really have anything, we're going through plays, maybe trying things out. He's always critiquing. He's always making sure that they knew what he expected out of them. And that way, when you got in the game, and the timing and all that stuff was always on track. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he would hold after practice. We'd have just the quarterbacks and wide receivers and rewatch 7-on-7, rewatch route patterns. The night before the game, he'd put together a tape, and we'd sit there and watch the opposing defense and go through their different skill sets, how we're going to attack them. Hey, reminders here.
Mm-hmm.
When you do this, you've got to stack him on that go route,
Yeah.
or they're going to try to undercut you on this in cut, so make sure we're coming downhill. So it's those subtle reminders that was a fabric of why we were so precise in that passing game.
I love that. Brandon LaFell once told me that Brady in Miami, they get down for warm-ups and he's making them stare into the sun to catch passes. And Brandon was like, what are we doing? And he's like, you're going to have to stare at the sun to catch a pass. So, like, you better get used to it. And they, sure enough, 40 minutes later, they were like, thank God we did that sun work. We'll get you out of here on this. It's called Badasses. It is the most badass person you ever played with. It could be from any team, any level of football. Just somebody, when you think this is a badass, I was around in football, it can be anybody. You have the floor, Matt Cassel.
Gosh, I want to say so many different names here. Like, I've played with so many different guys, from Adrian Peterson. Look, Tom Brady was a badass in his own right.
Of course.
Stafford had a broken back one year, played through the last 4 games with a broken back. But one guy that I always think of when I think badass was Jason Witten in Dallas. I mean, the way in which he approached the game, the intensity that he brought every single day, just was contagious. And I never forget, we were playing, I think it was Washington, and I threw him a ball. He got hit in the back. And so the next day, we had like the organization had like their Christmas party or whatever. So we went over to his house. We were pre-partying, and I was cracking jokes, and he's laughing. He's like, oh, stop, don't make me laugh. And so he goes through the night. We get into the facility in the morning, and he's got like a cracked rib, but they had to take him to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. This dude goes in on a Tuesday to the hospital. He had fluid in his lungs. It had filled up in his one lung. They had to go in and pump the fluid out. And I thought, well, that's the end of his year. There's no possibility that this guy's coming back. And sure enough, on Wednesday, he's out there in shorts. Like, he's not practicing. Thursday, he does individual. Friday, he practices. He plays on Sunday. He had a hole in his lung, and the guy got it drained and just would go out. But that's the type of guy he was. He was all about football. He loved the game. He was a great communicator. He's a great leader, and I have nothing but respect. But he was a badass.
Whoa, Jason Witten, welcome to Badass. We're going to put his photo up back here. Right, who am I looking at? Willie Roaf right there. We'll put him right there. Matt Cassel, thanks so much for coming on, man. NBC Sports, that was terrific. Thanks so much, man.
Absolutely. Anytime, man.